That is why the questions of marginalization, the questions of otherness, the questions of decentering, the questions of dislocation, the questions of the ambivalence of identity and identification, of the ambiguity of belongingness, of the fraying of boundaries, of the way, of the reciprocal, unending relationships between the unfolding semiotic of meaning and the stubborn intersection of political events. That is the terrain, the disturbed, uncertain terrain which the new conjuncture of the 60s produced, and which until the end of the 80s we have been trying to inhabit. Are we still there? We are certainly not in a moment which makes the things that we began to think about, the themes that shaped our work and our interests, our conversation, our reading, our experience. We're not in a different world from the world in which those things became constitutive. But they are relating, they are related to one another and connected with one another in different ways, in very different ways, from the moment when these new cultural fields of knowledge and conceptualization emerged. Exactly when that moment starts is an argument we could have. My own view is that it's already in process in the 80s. So it's really quite deep in the chronology of what I'm trying to discuss. My own view is that it has a lot to do with things which at that time we didn't think about very much. It has to do with the decentering of an essentially European experience. This is the importance of the post-colonial and of questions of marginalization and of questions of otherness and of questions of women's writing in Lydia's work. What those things signal, yes, is something which we are only now actually beginning to see in any depth and extensiveness. The emergence of a global world, a genuinely global world. That's a global world which is not, it's not that the old forms have disappeared. You couldn't say, it wouldn't be right to say, for instance, that the new interest in the translocal has completely undermined the nation state. It's not true. National cultures are not only strong, but revivified, like almost everything else. Another thing we could say about culture is that a lot of the domains we never spent any time on thinking about then have come back through the window to interrupt us. Can I name religion? Yeah? Religion has come back through the window to the outside world that we didn't really spend much time thinking about and interrupted us. So we are, in our settled thinking, ourselves being interrupted. We are now being interrupted. Yeah? We're being interrupted by a new world which is emerging, has been emerging over 10 or 20 years, but is beginning to take shape in a way which we couldn't see at an earlier phase. There's a lot of talk about globalization, yes, and about the global, as if, somehow in the era of when the world has finally become one globe, when it has become, Marx would have said, one market, but forget that for a moment. When the world has become one globe, and there's only one way of thinking about it, one dominant way of thinking about it, a kind of consensus around the virtue, what is called in the new economics, the virtuous circle of the market. In a world which is changed in that way, we are at the threshold of really an incredible shift, an incredible shift. You know, people in Europe think they've been, you know, massively invaded by the other. They come on the planes, they come on sailing ships, they come on the underside of aircraft, you know, they come in the back of trucks. They are determined to get in here, you know. We are being invaded by the other. We have no conception of a world, you know, when the old centers disappear, when the old centers have to share territory, have to share ideas with cultures that have not come the same historical roots as those which we have inhabited over the last centuries. We have no idea of the different conceptions of a modern life, the other kinds of modernities which are beginning to form around the world. Don't mistake, you know, what sometimes feels like the recidivism, the regressive nature of much contemporary politics. Lodged at the heart of that recidivism is an aspiration to a modern life, to be a modern kind of person, a person who is able to live a modern life to the full. There will be hundreds of versions of the modern life to come when the world is no longer centered as it has been for 600 years. We don't know what theory will look like in a world in which Beijing, not Washington, is the center. We don't have the remotest idea. We don't have the remotest idea how the differences that are now militarized in the global system, that have produced a kind of war of the civilizations, in spite of what everybody says, that is what we are engaged in, a covert war of the civilizations. Culture, you know, has returned to haunt us because culture has become the very thing that is embattled. Culture is embattled, one against the other. We didn't have any idea that culture implied that when we started in cultural studies. So, you know, we are at the beginning of a new conjuncture.